Hi guys, it's April, and it's time for some real talk. So I originally saw this over at the Dyslexic Reader, so I will link that down below, but this is also an original tag by Books with Alyssa J. I found a lot of the questions very poignant, and so I decided that I needed to do this as well because I like inserting myself in places that don't necessarily ask for me to be inserted. Now, in all honesty, this probably won't be that controversial, but I will just bring up a few things that go through my mind as I interact with this community and some thoughts in my 4+ years of being on Booktube. So the first question is, what did nobody tell you before starting Booktube? I think the biggest thing that I wasn't quite on level with was the amount of time that you would end up having to invest in the community. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but once you really get out there and once you really truly become passionate about it and you start to become really involved in it, watching all those videos, looking at all those Bookstagram posts, commenting on all those Bookstagram posts, being on Twitter, it takes up a lot of time. I am not necessarily a very social person, so there are definitely times in my Booktube career where I've kind of just gone silent. Sometimes I feel bad about it, sometimes I don't, but it can be very overwhelming if you don't curate yourself in the correct manner. I love talking to you guys. I never want that to stop, but there are times where I'm saving videos and I look back at my watch later list and it's like 300, 400 videos long. That's unrealistic, like extremely unrealistic. So if someone can figure out how to do that balance correctly, I would love to know that. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. I won't lie, I do watch a lot of videos that I don't comment on. I'm really good at being a silent lurker. I like supporting a lot of communities, just sometimes I'm watching and doing something at the same time, and by the time I think about commenting on the video, the thing has switched over to a new video and it's, yeah. For those of you who don't know, I've never had tea while making a video before. It's actually rather soothing. Who knew? And then there is always a topic of, what do you think of the typical Booktube videos? So the wrap-ups, the TBRs, and the hauls, those kind of standard things that we all put out, especially at the very beginning. For me, I love wrap-ups because that is generally where I get a feel for what I should read next because of other people's recommendations. I'm not a huge proponent of hauls, mainly because hauls have gotten me into trouble in the past and I've created huge TBRs that I'm never gonna get through, and so I want to curate what I'm reading a little better than that. I don't think they're necessarily a bad thing because a lot of times that's the only place you'll hear about a book because there are so many books and not all of them get quite the same kind of hype, but I generally don't watch them. They're not a bad thing, but if all you're doing is hauls, that's when I start to get a little iffy. I like to learn about the books. I like to hear opinions about books. I like to hear what the books are about. So I'm more drawn to the wrap-ups and the reviews, which is why I do a lot more of those on my channel. TBRs are fun. I only do them for readathons because I am such a mood reader and a lot of times it just doesn't happen. TBRs aren't necessarily bad. They're a great motivator for a lot of people. I don't enjoy watching them because, like I said before, I like to know more about the book. I like to know if I should be interested in the book or not necessarily. This is a book that I'm gonna read. So I go back and forth. I mean, I have nothing against any of the kind of staples because I can't be super creative all the time, and sometimes you just have to get stuff out there and you want people to be caught up on your reading life. So I understand why they exist. I have no ill will towards them. I'm just not a huge fan of watching lists that don't necessarily tell me a lot about the books. The next one is any assumptions you had about Booktube before joining, have they been proven correct or incorrect and things like that. I didn't have a lot of assumptions about Booktube, I won't lie. I was only watching Booktube maybe a month before I decided that, hey, this is something I wanted to do. Didn't give myself a lot of time to think about it. I do know that one of the biggest things was that people are generally very nice in this community because it is such a niche little place, and it's a place where people just like reading books. And generally, I have found that is very true. There are instances where things can get a little murky in that realm, though. I have a review over a series of unfortunate events, which I no longer read the comments for because it kind of blew up in a way I wasn't expecting. I think it's because I released it around the same time that Netflix released its series. I actually released mine before, and then the series came out, and so that review exploded. I picked apart the series a little bit. I brought up some issues that I had with it, and a lot of people decided that because I was picking it apart, I was not liking the series and that I wasn't worthy of life sometimes, or my intelligence was not where it needed to be. I generally really enjoyed that series, so I didn't understand why I was kind of getting some of that feedback. Yes, I pointed out a few flaws, but overall, I really, really liked the series. I generally gave it 3 to 4 stars for each of the books, but somewhere along the realm, people decided that I just didn't like the series. I think they hear parts of things I say, and as soon as I say that, they stop listening and start commenting. And that is sometimes a trap I think can happen on book reviews, especially of more well-known books, is if you don't necessarily hold the opinion of someone else, sometimes they can feel attacked. It isn't true. Isn't it true at all? And it's not something I ever really contemplated until I joined Booktube and that started happening. I talk about books with a lot of different people in my real life. I hadn't ever really gotten that kind of pushback before, so that was unexpected. So yes, people are generally nice, but sometimes they're not. Tea time. And then what is something that I have done to grow my audience? This will go back to the first question that I answered, and that is getting involved in the community and commenting on people's videos, commenting on people's tweets, commenting on people's Instagram. I think that is, it's networking. Pure and simple is it's networking. I don't think you will ever get an audience without networking somehow. I mean, there are those really interesting situations where I'm like, this person joined like a month ago. How are they already at like 15K? I don't understand. There's some logic in there that just doesn't, but it happens. But I find the truest way to gain an audience, especially an audience who will respond back to you, who becomes your best friend, who becomes someone you like to have conversations with, is to network. So this is why sometimes I will go back to the Booktube newbie tag and I will see who's new in the community and I'll start talking to the new people because they've got some interesting things to say. I mean, they don't have a huge audience yet, but they have a large voice. And so I just want to hear different perspectives, and I find a lot of very, very interesting people just by searching Booktube newbie and just running down that rabbit hole, and that's some of my favorite things to do sometimes. And of course, Twitter. I'm always on Twitter. I like lurking on Twitter. It's dangerous. But I know another thing that kind of started growing my community even more is finding something not necessarily just the standard Booktube kind of content, but also adding something a little more myself. So I have the nakeds that I bring in and out every once in a while, and I also have my live streams that I color and I chat with you guys, and it just gives me an opportunity to talk back to the community, and I think people have received that very, very well. I like doing it. I mean, coloring isn't necessarily your traditional Booktube category, but for me, coloring is in books, and books is all what I'm all about. Don't you just love when your camera just stops recording? It's great. And then you get to start again. That is one thing I'm still trying to figure out. I'm still figuring out this whole like YouTube thing. And then what is a common mistake I see a lot of new booktubers make? The biggest thing that maybe I start watching a video and then I just disappear is the audio quality. Most of the time, it doesn't bug me if your videos are dark or if they're grainy or anything like that. But if the audio quality isn't there, if I can't hear you, if there is a continuous beeping in the background, if there's something extremely distracting with the sound, that's usually when I decide that I think you're a great person, but I can't do this. This isn't something that's gonna work for me. And I think that goes back to the fact that I watch videos while I'm doing something else. So a lot of times I will be working on some kind of art project or some kind of other thing on the computer, or I will be doing dishes, I'll be making dinner, I'll be driving home or whatever, and I'll have it playing and I'll be listening to it, which is a great thing about Booktube. A lot of times I don't necessarily have to continuously wash your face, but I need to hear your words. That is the most important thing to me, which is why I'm still playing around with audio. That was one of the biggest things that I was always concerned about when I started a video, is making sure when I first started out, I had the onboard camera mic and figuring out how to adjust the levels when I'm editing and making sure it's at a good place. But now that I have this very unfortunately phallic looking thing, now that I have an additional off-camera mic that I'm experimenting with, I haven't figured it out yet, but having something so that your audio is great And I don't mind if you have music in the background. I find it unnecessary because I'm just here for your words. But if the music level isn't set correctly and it's overpowering you, please no. And also, one more thing before I end this tangent. If you're gonna have a mix of audio types, please make sure the volume levels are all even. I listen sometimes with headphones on. So if you're right here and I have to adjust the volume up so I can hear you, and then all of a sudden there is a music track that is already up here and I've adjusted the volume, it's now going to be up here and I'm going to blow my eardrums out. It isn't a pleasant experience. Please don't do that. I beg you. No. And of course the next one is my thoughts on working with publishers and sponsors. And this is another thing I don't have a huge deal with. And I mean, as long as you are upfront about the fact that you have that publisher contact or if you have that sponsorship contact. If it's just a sponsorship and you're like, this video is sponsored by da 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 da. I mean, yeah, I guess if you're making a living doing videos, that's fine, whatever. Probably not something I'm ever going to be interested in. Let's be honest, if you're toting whatever it is, I'm probably automatically going to be like, no. If you're working with a publisher and you're getting books for review, I think that is great. That's a great way to spread word of mouth. Let me know that that's the case. Please still be honest about your review over that book. If you're still very critical and if you're not just like, this is a great book, you should read it, and tell me literally nothing about anything else, I'm gonna stop believing you. But like I said, I don't normally watch a lot of hauls or a lot of TBRs, and I think that's where a good chunk of sponsorships and some of those publishers' connections are, because hey, they just want you to get the name of the book out. So as long as it's done in a way that's helpful to me, go ahead. But otherwise, if you're in this for the money, I'm probably not watching you anyways. Let's be honest. And the last question, which I find weird and interesting, I guess, is Booktube dying? And no, because if Booktube was dying, we wouldn't have people continuously making videos. I think maybe people's interest waxes and wanes. They perceive that Booktube is dying. And of course, there's always different waves. So if you started doing Booktube, you have a whole group of people that you have started Booktube with, and that whole cycle, people drop off. It's a thing. It happens. This isn't necessarily something that people are going to do for the rest of their life all of the time. So it can feel like it is dying if you haven't reached outside of your own little bubble. But if you're constantly exploring the community, if you're constantly connecting with new people, Booktube is very much thriving. Like I said, I am constantly going to new people's channels and watching some of those new videos because these are going to be the voices that are probably just going to shoot out of nowhere, and they're going to have some really great ideas. So I'm going to connect myself with as many people as possible because people have already established communities when they're huge, huge numbers. But these new people, they're willing to talk to me. They're willing to have conversations, and I think that is great. I have to watch myself. I am not dissing some of the bigger names, some of the bigger channels, because some of those guys are really great at starting conversations too and having conversations with. But I find it is the new people who are really, 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 really hungry, and they're not quite jaded yet, and they're like, what can we do? Let's collab. Let's do things. Let's explore what this is. So that is my opinion. No, Booktube is not dying. That's like saying YouTube is dying. I don't see it happening. So those are all of the questions that just got very real about Booktube. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this conversation. I think it is something that, I mean, I'm drawn to right now. Maybe it's just because of where I'm at in my Booktube journey. So tell me down below what your thoughts are on any of these questions, all of these questions, or if you want to do a video, let me know and link it down below so I can go and stalk you because I'm really good at that. Heart your beautiful faces. Bye.